afternoon. Today is June 12th. We're at the Brewster Ladies Library interviewing Dana Condit. Also in the room is our videographer, Jim Mills, and our note taker, Diane Jones. And I am the interviewer. My name is Faith Ellis. So Dana, welcome, and we appreciate that you're here. Let's start with what year you were born and where you were born.
I was born June 7th in 1948 in Boston. My dad was finishing college up there, and they were living up there at the time. They had the mill house, but hadn't really fully moved in until my dad graduated from college.
So when you talk about the mill house, you're talking about the house you grew up in, which is located where?
The house that I grew up in, which is located on Stoney Brook Road, right at the Grist Mill. The big old white house that's down there. It's not white now, the guy just put new siding on it.
Right. But it's the other side of the brook from the Stoney Brook Grist Mill.
Yes, it is.
So tell me more about your parents. Your father, where did he come from and what did he do for a living?
My dad was born in Lincoln, Mass. Back in those days, they all went in the service. So he had gone in the Navy. He was a submarine sailor in the Navy. And my mother was born in Winona, New Jersey. And she went in the Coast Guard during the war. And my parents met down at what was the first ever Howard Johnson's in Orleans. It's now the Lost Dog Pub.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first ever Howard Johnson's, and my dad was cooking, and because that's what he did on the submarine. He was a cook on the submarine, and my mom was waiting tables, and the rest is all history, sort of.
So they came to Brewster. Do you know how they came to own the house by the mill?
Well, they had looked around at a lot of different houses in town, and for some reason or another chose that one. It might have been the location. I think they had in mind to having a bunch of kids, which they did, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. Why they chose that particular house, I really couldn't tell you.
Tell me about, it's my understanding that your mother had a connection to Brewster Park?
Yes, my mother started coming up to Brewster Park when Brewster Park was just a tenting community. And her aunt built the cottage that she ended up giving my mother in 1935. That cottage was built. And it's a very basic cottage. The family still owns it today, and we really haven't done much at all to change it. It's very much like it was when my mom lived in it. She ended up spending the latter part of her life living in that house and loved it. Walked on the beach every day. Was one of the first people that did the turtle rescues. She just loved being there.
And just for the benefit of folks who may not know, Brewster Park is a cottage colony that's off of Lower Road, next to the Lower Road Cemetery.
Yes, it is, and it started as a cottage community, but like most other places and things that have gone on nowadays, people buy these cottages and can't wait to tear them down and build huge houses. Too big, but they get what they want.
And what did your father do for an occupation?
He did a lot of things. They chose to live here on the Cape. It was not an easy place to live in those days. Jobs were scarce. you know, and when you found one, they didn't pay a lot of money. But he did all kinds of odd jobs. He cooked at different places. I can remember he worked, there was a concrete block plant up in Yarmouth Fort, and he worked up there. He just, you know, did a multitude of things, and then ended up, the latter part of his life living here in the Cape, he worked once again as the cook up at the Barnstable County House of Correction. So he ended up, and then he moved to Vermont. He retired and moved to Vermont and did a little tiny bit of cooking and stuff up there.
And your mom worked as well.
My mom worked. She worked at a lot of the local places waiting. It used to be called, I think it was Lee's Four Aces, down the other end of town, which is now Lorino's. She worked right down here at the woodshed. Just odd jobs, you know, waitressing, you know, there were 5 of us when we moved into that house, you know, I mean, and not when we moved in. 5 came along, but, you know, everybody had to work. Everybody worked.
And she also drove the school bus for a bit.
She did. She drove a school bus for more than a bit. She drove generations of kids on the school bus. And it was well known in town, and I think well liked by most of the kids. Billy Sears said to me one time, "I don't know what you boys did to your mother, but you can't put anything over on her." And it was about the truth, you know. A lot of people tried. She drove kids one time smoking pot. She told them if they didn't quit smoking pot, she's going to drive them to the police station. Well, she drove them to the police station. Yeah. Yeah.
And you are the oldest of how many siblings?
I am the oldest of 5. I'm sad to say that there are only 2 of us left, the oldest and the youngest. The other ones have passed in different manners, but they're growing up down there. There was 5 of us who lived in that house down at the mill. There was plenty of bedrooms and plenty of room.
So tell us more about that house, because it's kind of, from the outside, it looks like it's very intriguing inside. I've never been in it.
Well, it is a neat house inside. When my folks bought that house, if you look at it, it's built into a huge hillside. And what holds the hillside back are massive boulders. And when my folks bought the house, the back wall was all exposed in the room that we call the tavern room. That's where the big fireplace and the cook oven and, or you know, the old brick oven and stuff was. We called that the tavern room, but that was all open.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad studded it off and sheetrocked it and so forth. And the house was, you know, it certainly was not in good shape. When we first moved in there was no heat at all. Fireplaces. I can remember, I mean, you just went to bed with more quilts and stuff on. It was not, you know, I didn't know the difference. We didn't know the difference. You know, we ran the fireplaces and, you know, you'd sit on the couch or chairs or whatever and bundle up, and that's just the way it was. And then they put heat, they put a floor furnace in, and all of us kids would come running down in the morning and stand on the floor furnace.
Like one of those ones with the big grate? That,
big rectangular, I don't know, 4 by 6 grate in the floor that it just blew hot air out. But it was a lot better than nothing, which is how we started. I remember going to the bathroom upstairs. There were 3 bathrooms in that house. I remember going to the bathroom upstairs and the toilet was frozen. I mean, it was cold. Yeah. It was cold. My friend Billy Dugan came over to see me one day, and my mother says, or Billy says, "Where is he?" She said, "He's still in bed. Go get him out of bed." And Billy came upstairs, and I had about 4 quilts on me and snow piled up on the quilts. He was at the bed with the windows open. And it was snow. Billy couldn't believe it. Because they weren't, you know, they were a little better off, but I mean, it was hard sledding here for a lot of people. You know, 70 years ago. Everybody, it was not an easy place to live. once, as I said before, I think I started, my parents chose to live here. They wanted to live in the country. My dad grew up in the country. My mother grew up in the country. And they wanted to be, you know, in the country. Back then, Brewster was certainly country. It still is. I ride around here and I drive on these roads and think to myself, what a beautiful country road. And we live on it. And they're all here in town. Beautiful buildings. Anyhow, I'm getting sidetracked.
Well, actually, it's a nice segue to my next question, which is, can you describe your neighborhood, your childhood neighborhood, sort of the perimeters of it, and what cool things were inside of it, and how it is or is not different today?
Well, the coolest part was where I grew up, and that was right next to the Heron Run. And everybody wanted, all the guys, everybody wanted to come and play at my house. So
Yeah.
I always had a lot of friends. But honestly, there was Billy Eldridge lived on Paynes Creek Road. Billy Dugan lived on 6A, and there were no other kids in West Brewster. And the only houses that were there were the houses that you can drive down now and say to yourself, that's an old house, that's an old house. Other than that, I remember when they built the Ramsey's house, the Gage's house.
And those are on Stoney Brook.
On Stoney Brook Road, between Stoney Brook, the Heron Run and 6A headed west. And yeah, I remember when they built all those houses, you know, I mean, there was just nothing going on. So as far as kids and whatnot in the neighborhood, there just weren't that many. And once again, growing up at the Run, we always had rowboats, and you know, our folks allowed us to go play on the pond. And I just, unfortunately, I attended a classmate of mine's funeral service the other day. Kenneth Bates grew up just up the street. And I was telling stories about he'd come up, because they were always a big camping family. And he'd come up and we'd throw all of our stuff into one of those boats and just say, we're going to go camping tonight, Mom. And paddle off. Had campfires, and you know, nobody ever bothered us. We set up little tents and stuff. It was just
like what age were you? Like pre-teen? Like off
oh
for an
yeah,
overnight?
oh yeah. We probably started doing this at 10 years. Probably 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
We had boats forever, but you know, I didn't know life preservers or you know, you had a bucket with you. They leak so bad, you know. And then my brother and I figured out how to. It had been fiberglassed up a little bit, and we figured out, my father and Bill Carr always had resin and stuff around. They didn't have any matting. So we went and stole my brother's diapers. And my mother couldn't figure out where all the diapers were going. We were using them to fix the boat. But they were so thick compared to the lightweight glass matting that by the time we were done, we couldn't even move the boat, you know, over the years, you know.
Yeah.
Couldn't even move the boat.
Oh my God.
But it was just, you know, it was simple fun. And as I got older, I had a trapping line. I trapped.
Well, who taught you all this?
Bill Carr taught me a lot of that stuff.
And can you say a little bit who Bill Carr is, or who he's related to?
Bill Carr grew up here in town, and he's related to.
Was he related to Mary Howe?
No. He lived, did a lot of work, and hung around with Mary for a long while. They were really good pals, you know. The people at Tabors. He was related to the
Tabor family.
The Tabor family. It wasn't the Tabors. It was the other side of that. Bakers and Tabors.
Yeah.
Related to them.
Yeah.
And he was a guy that he grew up here in town and fished and hunted and trapped and, you know, he was one of the, you know, never really had a serious job, delivered the mail and did some other stuff, but he always put more time aside for, you know, what Cape Cod was all about back then. And I learned a lot of stuff from him and my dad. My dad was always into hunting and fishing and,
Mhm.
doing that stuff. That's why they moved here.
Yep.
I wouldn't say you could live off the land, but, sure was a lot easier to live, food-wise and stuff, because it was simple then.
One of the features near you was the dump. Did you have any dump adventures?
We had a lot of dump adventures. Oh, it was just it was an open hole in the ground. And when we were kids, the hole was massive. I mean, that's not just thinking of it as a kid, but it was a huge hole in the ground. You think they'll never fill that up. They did when they built the big condominium complexes here in town. They filled it right up with all the wood and waste and stuff. But anyhow, we used to go up there, we'd tape a flashlight to the barrel of our .22 rifles and go up there and shoot rats at night. They'd be running all over the place and we'd go up there and shoot the rats. And then there was an open pit and somebody was forever lighting it on fire. Not us kids. My dad was on the fire department, although one of my brothers was a pyromaniac. We could talk about that later.
Yeah.
But it's a dump. And then, sad to say, that in the wintertime, when it got cold enough, the rats would leave the dump. And they would come and infest all the houses in the neighborhood. The gauges, they would infest them. But, you'd have rats, and you knew it. When it got cold, the rats would show up.
So was there a gauge house kind of up behind you?
There was a gauge house up behind me, and that was a neat time in my life. Most of these guys, and there had to have been 5 boys and a couple of girls, and a lot of them had come home from Korea, the war, and so forth, and they were always hanging around the house, and they were probably from 18 to 25 or 26, and they were always, laughing and joking, and I just loved to go up there. And their father was sick, dying of cancer. Turn that off a minute. I'm sorry. All right. So my father would send me up. Mr. Gage was sick, and my father worked for the E.C. Hall Company. Another thing that he did, he was a salesman over the years, and he worked for the E.C. Hall Company, and they sold confections and tobacco and I don't know what all else. And he would bring home candy for Mr. Gage, and he'd give it to me to take up. And I just loved going up there and hanging around and listening to those guys laughing and joking. And they were always into, once again, hunting and trapping and fishing and doing all that stuff. So I was up there one day, and one of them said to me, "Hey boy, go down into the root cellar and get a jar of, I don't know, some kind of pickles." So I said, all right, and the cellar door was over and all the way against the wall. So I opened the door, and I walked down the stairs, and I got down the bottom, it was dark in there, I said, I can't, it's dark down here. They said, put your hand right out in front of you, there's a light. And I pulled the cord down to turn the light on, and the whole cellar was full of snapping turtles. Full of snapping turtles. I was horrified. I screamed, they laughed, they knew what they were doing. They put one over on the kid. But
why? Why were they collecting them?
They would go all over the Cape, not on this end of the Cape,
Yes.
and they'd collect them. And once or twice, but in the season, a small trailer truck would come from New York, and they'd drop about 4 of them into a wooden barrel, and they'd take them off and sell them down in New York for food. There was a certain ethnic group or something that there was a huge demand for snapping turtles. Who'd have thunk it? But once again, that was another way to make $1 here living on the Cape and eat. I guess if you were into eating snapping turtles. Yeah, they say it's pretty good. I've never had it. I went with my father once. We went down. You take a burlap sack, and they had this pointy end of an old hoe or a rake or something, and they'd whittle it down and put a 30-30 casing on it, or a shell casing on it, and on the other end they'd put a hook, and you'd walk along, and you could tell where the dirt and the mud and stuff had been messed with.
Yeah.
And these snapping turtles hibernate. They dig underneath the soil and the mud and they hibernate. And you go along with this stick, and if you hit a rock, it was a sharp noise. And if you finally found a turtle, it was a thunk.
Mm-hmm.
And you turn this tool over, and you'd work them up out of the ground, and they're dormant. So they don't bother you. Just throw them into a gunny sack and get them on the way back.
Yikes.
But, and we gave it to the gauges.
Yeah.
We weren't putting. We didn't have a cellar.
They already had a system.
Oh, that was funny.
Oh my gosh. So, because you're next to the grist mill, did you play around the grist mill?
We did. The grist mill and the surrounding stream and ponds belonged to us, Condit boys, and our friends. And oh my word, we go up. Some 1 or 2 years they never took the lights off the Christmas tree. We go up and light the lights at the 4th of July and the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And then we go in and start the mill anytime we want to. Just go in and get it going,
Yeah.
And once again, we understood how it worked. We never broke anything. We didn't try to do damage. We just said, hey, let's get the mill going. And then when our friends found out that we knew how to do that, everybody wanted to come and get the mill going. But and then we close the water off in one of the sides of the stream and see what kind of eels and fish and snapping turtles and whatever else might be in the stream, because it was bone dry.
Oh wow! So I get what you mean.
Yeah, we put a board across
and just shut off one side of it and
and then play in the stream. Once again, I mean, today I would frown on that, seeing as I look after the place, kind of, sort of the water part of it.
Yeah.
And but once again, we didn't hurt anything.
Yeah. So West Brewster was sort of an interesting collection of adults.
Yep. Yes, it was.
No, you go.
Can we back up?
Yeah, sure.
Can we talk about the gauges?
Oh yes,
more?
yes.
One Thanksgiving, my parents had a beagle, not one of the tiny ones, but a good-sized beagle. And one Thanksgiving, the beagle showed up with a fully cooked goose. Fully cooked.
Just in its mouth?
In its mouth. Brought it home. So my parents knew where it came from. It came from the gauges. So my father, he didn't know he knew what to do, but he wasn't looking forward to doing it. He took the goose back up to the gauges and, knocked on the door and started to apologize and everything, and they all started roaring laughing. They tried to eat the goose. It was so tough that they also cooked a turkey. They put the goose just out back, and the dog ran off with it, and they had their Thanksgiving turkey dinner. But the dog showed up with a fully cooked goose. Oh my gosh. Unreal. Yeah, the gauges were, Ernie was, I think, one of the first police officers here in town. Ernie was.
And John was
the fire chief for a long while. That was a tiny little fire department back then. When we were kids, we got to be 16 years old. Not all of us, but a lot of us got on the fire department. And we were paid volunteer firemen. You'd go running all over town. That's back when they had the old fire siren system.
Yep.
That was fun.
Do you remember the different signals for the different parts of
I don't recall which, 1, 2, and 3, and 4
I keep thinking
was.
East Brewster was 3, but somebody thought it was something else. So
Yeah,
my memory's a little hazy.
West Brewster was 2 or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were.
Yeah.
All I know is you'd come down here and you'd follow the water. Which street it went up and down. You could follow the water spilled on the street right to the fire.
Oh, I see. If you're a volunteer.
If you're a volunteer,
yeah.
you just show up and then follow the water on the street. But it was that was neat. First time I ever backed one of the trucks into the old station down there, something happened. I had to pull ahead and then back up again. When I did, I broke one of the window lights out of the door. Well, the old boys wouldn't let that one go.
Right.
But that was fun. was fun.
Oh my gosh.
And they used to have dinners once a month. I think it was maybe just in the winter time. They'd have a dinner, and we'd have it down here at what now the old, what's the rest, not, Council on the Aging.
Oh, yeah, the old town hall.
The old town hall.
Yeah.
They had dinners in there and stuff.
With what, with
With
special?
all the firemen.
All the firemen,
All
did
the
they, was
firemen.
it a game night or?
No, they just get in there, have a dinner,
Yeah.
and, you know, talk about business, if there was any business to talk
Yep.
about.
Yep.
But it was, Roy was heavy into it when we were kids.
Roy Jones.
Roy Jones
Mhm.
was heavy duty into it when we were kids.
Mhm.
And went on to become the chief, you know. So, yeah, that was interesting.
So, so back up to the neighborhood.
The neighborhood.
The adults thought, there was a bit of an artist colony up there.
There was, I guess it must have been in the early 50s, some people, and I think a lot of them knew each other, moved up there. The Fitches, Margot still lives in town, was heavily involved years ago in the fire department, the rescue squad. And there were the Bouchards. He was a photographer. I believe he was a photographer. Or a painter. He was a painter. Anyhow, he was quite famous. Not famous enough for me to remember what he was.
Yeah.
He was quite famous. And
The
who else?
Slacks.
The Slacks moved up there. They were artists. They were wonderful people. There was 5 of us kids, and my parents were working and whatnot, and we very often would get dropped off up at the Slacks' house. And they had an older daughter, Susan. 2 older daughters.
Right, and Mr. Slack was Chester.
Chester Slack, Chester and Brownie.
Brownie Slack.
Chester and Brownie Slack.
Mhm.
And they were gourmet cooks. Boy, and we'd go up there after school, and they had made these chocolate cakes with white drizzled frosting and stuff, and we're like, whoa, would you like another piece? So anyhow, they were nice people in the neighborhood, but you're right, there were a lot, and then there were other people. There was this guy that used to come and spend the winter times, what was it, Emmanuel Pappas, and he said he was from New York City, but he usually showed up and spent the winter in some little shack that he would build up behind the dump out. There's all woods then.
Mhm.
There were a lot of strange people.
What
the
about
goat lady, Mrs. Fuller?
The goat lady? So we'll talk about her, but I also want to talk about the Hayes and the Aikens.
The Hayes and the Aikens. I knew all of them very well. I worked for Conrad Aiken for, I think, 75 cents an hour, clearing briar canes and stuff like that, and he stood right over me and got his 75 cents worth, I'll tell you. He was a hard man. He was a hard man. And
John and Christy.
John and Christy Hay. And they had children that were our age, went to school with them.
Mhm.
And he was a nice people. They were both nice people. The whole family was nice.
Mhm.
My brother Bryant went out with his sister for a while. And then, John, they bought a place in Maine, and they'd spent a lot of time in Maine, but he was here and wrote the great books that he was, the naturalist that he was. And, I enjoyed, he'd come down, walk down to the mill all the time.
Mhm.
One of the last times I saw him down at the mill, he had walked down, and I said to him, geez, John, I said, I'm really good to see you. You're so spry, and you're able to be out and about and walk down here like this. He goes, you don't think I wanted to? He said, they took my license. I said, well, hop in, I'll give you a ride home, It'll ease a little of the pain.
Because it was kind of a hike for him.
It was, and then their drive, you ever been up there?
Yes, the driveway's
The driveway, I think, is 3/4 of a mile of winding uphill.
Yeah.
It's up there.
Yeah.
They were good folks.
And then Hi Brewster.
Oh my gosh, Hi Brewster was, Bill Arbuckle owned Hi Brewster and lived there along with his friend Walter Hyde. And he lived there mostly in the beginning, in the summertime. And it was it wasn't huge. Beach, but it was a sprawling sort of a complex with a big barn and a couple of cottages right out on the pond. And he ran it sort of like an inn type thing and rented rooms. And then in the winter, he'd move up to Boston and work for SS Pierce. And then as time went on, he developed it more and more into the restaurant and inn that it came to be. And it was all of my siblings worked up there. I think I was the only one that didn't work up there.
They worked up in the kitchen?
He worked at the kitchen, or chambermaid, cleaning. My sister Faith cleaned, as well as waited, and my brothers worked in the kitchen. And it was, Bill and Walter, Walter had family, Bill had family in Florida. And he'd take my mother and one of the younger kids down there, drive them down, drive them back. They were just, really great neighbors, good people. When Gail and my wife, I'm married to Gail, Singleton, Condit. When after we were married, a while after we were married, they hosted our party, our reception type parties, and we didn't do it right away. It was just, it was, they gave it to us. They'd go away, Bill and Walter would go away in the wintertime, and then my brother Harry he kept the restaurant open for, he was an unbelievable cook, chef, really. He was capable of cooking all that they cooked, and they'd go away and leave him to cook for the last little bit of the season or something. And then he'd throw his own parties. He'd he'd invite all of his friends and cook up these huge dinners and stuff, It was, and then they had the little bar. It was a bring your own bottle thing. And, and you didn't have to bring one. There was one of everything behind the bar, two of everything. And, but they had the little side bar in there and stuff. It was a fun place. It really was.
But it was
neat place.
fine dining, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh!
It was
in
really
its day,
high end. Yeah.
Oh, very high end food. Very, very high end in its day. And they had a clientele of people, politicians, and people that would come down. And they had a few rooms in the house. They had two nice cottages. One of the cottages, one of my aunt and uncles helped pay and design to redo the inside of it all in cypress wood and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah, they used to come up and spend, a month or so up here at High Brewster.
Huh.
They were fishermen, traveled up and down the coast fishing, and but they, so there were people that was always staying there, and then the dinners. It was fun. It really was.
One of the things that you had mentioned to me at one point was eating the herring roe.
Eating herring roe. Yep, we did.
Do you like herring roe?
No. Not really. I never did. It's what they made ketchup for. We used to eat a lot of herring roe. Like I said, there was 5 of us, and it was a meal. It's good protein.
Yeah.
And my mother, about twice a week, my mother would say, "Why don't you boys run over and pick us up a mess of herring roe for dinner?" And we'd go get herring roe, and it's very fishy. You have to be careful that you cook it enough, but you can't overcook it. You can't. The only way you can cook it is overcook it, and it ends up grainy. It's like eating sand, chewable sand, and. Like I said, that's what ketchup's for. With enough ketchup, you could get it down.
Right, kind of like liver.
And Faith, it's so funny that you should ask me this, because 2 weeks ago, John King, one of the Kings.
Oh, yes. Who's a gauge.
Who is a gauge,
yes.
Who is a gauge. John King and he lives in New Hampshire, and we were talking about it, and he's a commercial fisherman, and he's allowed so many herring in New Hampshire. I thought it was closed all up and down the East Coast.
Yeah.
He brought me down a mess of herring roe.
Oh boy.
He did. Gail always used to say she liked it. She didn't like it as much as she thought.
No, we had some herring roe 2 weeks ago. We had some, and it's just as awful as it was then. Sorry, not a herring roe fan.
Oh my God.
Oh, anyhow, yeah, we did eat a lot of herring roe. And we used to sell it too. My brother and I would row it out, and my father got us these little half pint and quart containers, and people would call up, and we'd go out and row out what they wanted and give it to them fresh. We were competing with Harry Alexander. He didn't like that.
Oh, so you knew Harry?
Oh my word, I knew Harry, of course. Yeah, he was a character.
So
oh
he was the herring warden for a long time.
He was the herring warden for a long, long time, and he spent the springs down at the Herring Run, and it was his deal. He sort of looked after it, kept it clean, and he sold roe. He sold a lot of roe. I mean, people could just drive by and stop in. He had it cut and ready to go. And unfortunately, the guy was, I don't know, maybe this is appropriate or not.
Well, it's already been said in prior interviews.
Oh, it has?
Yes.
He was a heck of an alcoholic. And he and his son, Kenneth, and they get down there drinking wine. And, oh my word, they would get loaded. So loaded that they'd go to the bathroom standing still. They always had rubber knee boots on. Fill the boots up and it'd run down the street. That loaded. Anyhow, they were, and there was Harry, Jesse, and Kenneth lived in the house across the way from my driveway where Gary and Peggy live now. Peggy Farber's house.
Right.
And they lived in there, and once again, they had no heat. They had an old wood-fired kitchen stove. That was the heat in that place, an outhouse. Nice outhouse. And I remember going in the barn in there, and he'd have coat hangers. They'd straighten coat hangers out, and he'd have smoked herring, all strung right through the eyes, all strung out on the in the rafters, hung from the rafters in there. They were eating it.
Yeah.
You know, they were smoking. He'd save all the ones that he rode out and smoke them. You know, but he was.
When did the town stop allowing people to take fish in that way?
I want to say it was either 1966 or 67, maybe 68, but it happened when I was in the service. I went in the service from 66 to 69, and in that period it stopped.
Okay.
It stopped, which it was a good thing, I suppose. What we're talking about is the town used to sell the rights to take herring from the brook 4 days a week during daylight hours, and they'd sell that right, and there was only two different people that really bought it, and one of them was Causey Montagna from Barnstable, and another guy was Causey Montagna. Maybe I'll think of it, but Causey Montagna was a pig. All the fish that fell on the ground and stuff, he'd just take his barrelfuls or truckfuls and he'd leave.
Yeah.
The place was always, flies and just maggots and nastiness. And this other guy, he was from Cohasset. Bernard Salvador was his name. And he was a lobsterman, big-time lobsterman. And I think he was using it for bait, and then they'd sell it for cat food. But he froze a lot of it for bait, salted it, and froze it for bait. But they used to rent out, I think you wanted it for about $1,000, like $800 or $1,000 were what these guys would pay the town. And they'd come in and set up. 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, they were allowed to take fish.
And they took them through the net at the seining pool?
They would plug up the stream going out of the big seining pool at the exit, going up to the pond. And then they had a great big foot seine, and they'd seine all the way around the pond to this big platform that they had stood up. A platform here and a platform that went down to the water. And right here next to it, they set a telephone pole. And they'd seine this great big net in, and the
bottom of it was rings with a rope on it so you could pull it tight. So they'd pull it tight, and then it was all corks on the top, and then they'd pull them in, and they'd get it right hard up against this board platform that they'd made. And then they'd back a dump truck up, or a dump truck full of barrels, but more often than not it was just a dump truck. They'd back a dump truck up to the platform, and then they had this great big round bull net that was fastened through a series of pulleys to this telephone pole and down again to a pickup truck. And the pickup truck would back up, they would lower this big bull net, once again with chains on the bottom and a rope so that they could pull it tight, and then release it. They'd dip the huge bull net into this mass of herring. The pickup truck would back up and would get it back up over this dump truck, and then they'd undo the ring, and all the fish would spew into the dump truck. And then they just keep doing this over and over, and they took dump truck loads of fish out of there.
Wow.
And I honestly, I'm the chairman of the Alewife Committee here in town. I have been for a while. And the problems that are going on now are nothing compared to what, in the old days, that we had no problems. The problems are now.
Mm-hmm.
The problems are the offshore fishing industry. All of what I don't feel, I watched it all my life, how many fish would come and go. And when the offshore fishery started, and that's where our herring went. I don't believe it was those guys. The run would run Friday, Saturday, and Sunday full open.
Yeah.
That's not where our herring went. Anyhow. That was quite an operation back then. And
there it was, right beside your house.
right beside the house. And you'd get up in the truck because the state would stock the brook with trout. And inadvertently, these guys were bailing them up and putting them in the back of the truck. And we'd go up there with our little dip net, and we had trout for dinner all the time. And you'd sit in school, and when the scales would get on you, the fish scales would get on you, you couldn't see them.
Yeah.
When they were on you. When they dried up, it'd be like, oops,
Yeah.
fish scales.
Oh gosh.
Sitting in school, picking fish scales off.
So actually, that's a great segue to school.
School.
So what elementary school did you go to?
We went to Brewster Elementary School. It was 1 through 8. And we're going to back up a little bit more. We're going to talk about Mrs. Blue's kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah. Mrs. Blue was a lady who lived right down across from the Brewster store, and she had a kindergarten. And sometimes she held it there, or was it next door? I think it might have been next door. And then sometimes she held it down at the very first cottage on the right-hand side when you went into Brewster Park. She would hold kindergarten down there. But she was a character.
So tell me more about her. Did
Well,
she work at the Brewster store for a while?
Oh, she may have.
Yeah.
She may have.
Tell me what you remember about her.
She was just an older, big woman. Long gray hair, kind of I don't know, not outspoken or whatever, but one of those people just a little ahead of a lot of the others.
Uh-huh.
She was a neat lady.
And who were some of your classmates in kindergarten?
In kindergarten, I don't much remember who my classmates were in kindergarten so much as they're probably the same ones in first grade.
Yeah.
And that was Jack Latham, Lloyd Williams, Lorraine Doe, Pat Fox.
Was Billy Dugan in your class?
Billy passed through my class on his way up and down. Yeah, Billy was in my class. Billy was one of my best friends. We did a lot of stuff together. They were messing around with cars and, down at the brook and all kinds of stuff. He was a character.
Mm-hmm.
Billy was a character.
I I remember a few stories about the Sea Pines School.
Yeah, yeah. The Sea Pine School is a private girls' school here in town. We used to go down and they'd open up the windows and let us sneak in, and they'd sneak out. Billy and I, and they also, where the true value is now, there's a building that's out back. Well, the building that's out back used to sit on the street, and that building used to be like a dormitory for Sea Pines. And out front, they had this little wishing well. No, it wasn't a wishing well. It was a little small, tiny little building. And Billy and I were down there one night, and somebody had called the cops or something anyhow, or somebody had showed up and cops, knew that we were there. So we went and hid in this tiny little building, and they were all running. We could hear them all run around, looking, talking, and everything. Billy and I were sitting in there, all we could do to keep from laughing.
Yes, and then, of course, because the school was in East Brewster, there were a few stories I had heard about laundromat goings-on.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I didn't hang around down East Brewster that much. That was a trip.
Right.
Really.
Right,
And we lived there. You guys lived in East Brewster and had your things, and we lived in West
Right.
Brewster. And,
Had your things.
oh, we did get together and play ball and stuff down there in where the bank is now, I think,
Yeah.
is an open field.
Kick the can.
Yeah, kick the can and play ball down there. We go down, and then in the wintertime we get together and skate. The Brewster guys would all get together and we'd go to Orleans and skate.
You just clicked on your...
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Concentrating.
Where did you skate? Because I have memories of...
There were a couple of cranberry bogs off of, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the road. I can't remember the name of the road, but there was a couple of cranberry bogs down in there. It's where all the Orleans guys used to skate, play hockey.
Okay.
And, oh boy. You
Well,
gotta-
Schoolhouse Pond used to be a skating place.
Oh, here in Brewster, yeah, it sure did. That was a great place to skate, and everybody from town used to come and skate there. And the fire department tried hosing it off, and they tried, using the gravely to plow it off
Yeah.
and stuff. But that was always a lot of work, and ended up, you start pushing snow around, it piles up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it, but we all had a lot of fun down there playing hockey games and crack the whip, and it was fun. It was fun.
And we used to skate up that, up past you. Is that Elbow Pond? Canoe Pond.
Canoe Pond, yeah, Canoe Pond is on the left, right by the power lines. Yeah, and then we used to love to skate down here on Briar Lane, because on the cranberry bogs down there, the cranberry bogs would freeze really fast compared to the ponds.
Yeah.
And there's a heck of a difference between falling through a pond and a cranberry bog. You get wet up to your knees.
Right,
you
right.
know? I fell through the pond up to Lower Mill Pond one time. My father and my brother and I were walking. That's one thing, my dad used to take us on hikes around those ponds and up into the woods and stuff. And we were coming back from one of them, and I skirted across right underneath High Brewster. It necks down a little bit, gets a little small, and the water didn't freeze there enough. I fell right through. And by the time I got home to my house, my pants were frozen solid.
Wow.
My little legs were
Yeah.
moving inside stiff pants. And that was one and only of that, thank you.
Yeah. So were you a Boy Scout or any organizations as a youth?
I was. I belonged to the Cub Scouts here in town and Boy Scouts. And I spoke of this just Sunday. My friend Ken Bates grew up just down the street here. His parents were very much involved in Scouts here in town, in the Scouting. And and Kenny and I were in the same class, so we spent a lot of time there, and doing the Scouting thing.
Who were the Scout leaders?
Scout leaders, Cub Scout leader. Mrs. Latham was a leader.
Oh, the den mother. Betty
Yeah,
Latham?
Yeah, Betty Latham was a den mother. That was, yeah. And, oh gosh, who else? I should remember, but I don't.
That's okay.
Don't ever have chemotherapy.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm just curious to know, and is for me, certainly growing up, one of the big events that happened was when JFK died. Do you remember? You're a bit older than me, but is that a memory?
It is a memory, and I remember exactly where I was. Like a few events in our lives, you remember where you were.
Mhm.
I was standing on the platform at Dennis-Yarmouth Regional High School, getting ready to get on a school bus.
Mhm.
They announced it over, they had a school-wide PA system, and they announced it over the entire PA system,
Mm.
what had happened, and we were just like, everybody was shocked.
Mhm.
You know, even at that age, I mean, you understood the severity of what had happened,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were some of the first jobs that you had as a young man?
Working for Conrad Aiken. I did stuff like that around for people, a little
Yeah.
bit of that, and then we worked down at the golf course, caddying.
The
for
Brewster
Smith-
golf course?
The Brewster golf course, the Smiths. Used to go down Thad Ellis Road then to get there.
Mhm.
And I remember going down caddying, we'd ride our bikes down. Me and my brother and Billy Dugan and I don't know who else. But that was, you'd stop up here at Ken's and buy fruit pies and Coke and this and that. And you really didn't make much at the end of the day,
Yeah.
caddying. People weren't paying a huge amount. And then I worked for Neil Nevin down at the Jolly Whaler, mowing lawns and just doing whatever he did at motels and campgrounds and
Mhm.
stuff, That was a good job. I learned an awful lot of stuff from Neil,
Mhm.
how to fix stuff,
Yeah.
I learned a lot from Neil and always enjoyed working with him. And still see Neil and Paulette. Gail and I were fortunate enough to spend a few weeks in Florida this winter, and we looked them up.
Yeah.
They live in Titusville. They've been down there 20-something years. They do come up here, but the Nevinses were good. Gail worked there. That's where I met Gail.
Okay.
Well, actually, we met before working there. We had met. She came down as a vacation there. They ended up kind of at the end of the day. That's where they were.
Mhm.
And the next day, the kids were like, or the parents were like, all right, here we go. And Roy and her brother, Roy and Gail were like, no, we're not leaving.
Yeah.
They went down to Paynes Creek,
Yeah.
like the beaches, we're not leaving. So they ended up coming back year after year after year and staying down there in the cottages at the
Mhm.
Jolly Whaler.
Mhm.
They became friends with the Nevinses, Jack and Jackie and
Mhm.
Neil and Paulette,
And they were very helpful to Gail.
Oh, they were very, very helpful to Gail. The Nevinses, when Gail was born in Ireland and grew up in Toronto, Canada, and coming down here as a kid and so forth, she knew that she wanted to live down here. She was always a British citizen. She never took out her Canadian citizenship, but she
Mhm.
always knew she wanted to live in the States.
Mhm.
So, and back in those days, you just couldn't show up here. You had to have a job and a sponsor and all of that. And Jack and Jackie, and Neil and Paulette, really helped in that respect. Making sure she had a place, people
Yep.
and whatnot. As she came to this country, she had to have a job.
Yeah.
She had to have secured a job to get here. A little different nowadays.
So let's talk about high school.
High school.
And could you explain that Brewster,
Yes.
the Brewster decision?
A lot of people, I told someone that just this past week, explained that to me. What it was that back in the day, when I went to school here in Brewster Elementary School, there were 16 of us in my 8th grade class. And most of the classes were that size. So we went 1 through 8 down here at the elementary, and then
we didn't belong to either one of the unions, either the Nauset Union or the Dennis-Yarmouth Union. So the town simply paid the tuition. And it was up to the family and the students to choose which school you decided to go to. And I could have cared less if school kept. It was that way in elementary school. There was always hunting, fishing, and trapping. And
Yeah, yeah.
There was always something to do. Nouns and adverbs and adjectives. I didn't have time for that.
Mhm.
And it was the same in high school, basically. And it wasn't that I didn't have the ability. I just didn't care. And so my family and myself chose to go to Dennis-Yarmouth. And most of the kids from this end of town did.
Mhm.
Some of the sports-oriented guys went to DY, Dennis-Yarmouth, but it was a big high school. Even then, it was a good-sized school, and they were adding on to it. And I met a lot of people there that I'm still lifelong friends with
Mhm.
today. That I spent time this weekend with.
Mhm.
So I mean, it was a good place to go to school. Once again, I played sports. I played hockey and I played soccer. And then when I started to get messing around putting engines in cars and stuff, that was the end of sports.
Yeah.
I didn't have time for that either. But DY was a good school. I enjoyed going over there. My sister, who was 4 years younger than I am, was the last class to go to school over there. She was the last one. Then the town joined the Nauset school system and became part of the Nauset Union. Been paying ever since.
So was it in high school that you met your crowd of fun-loving friends
It
from
was.
East Dennis?
It was in high school that I met a lot of these friends that like I said, I'm still friends with today, still fun-loving.
What did you call yourselves? I thought you had a name for a
The
loose...
we- yeah, I don't know what it was, something or other drinking boys,
The East Dennis?
yeah,
You
it was
told
Dennis,
me once.
Dennis drinking boys or something like that. We had this spot, we'd all meet on Friday and Saturday nights up overlooking Fallon's Pond in Dennis. Drink beer and then go get our dates or go to dances or whatever was going
Yeah.
on.
What was the drinking age when you were...
21.
Okay.
We were, I don't know, 17 and 18.
Yeah.
There was always somebody to buy booze for you, beer for you.
Mhm.
We didn't drink booze. Anytime you tried, it was a bad experience. Bad enough drinking beer.
Oh my God. So did you have a lot of or I shouldn't put it that way. What interactions might you have had with the Brewster police
Oh my word.
that you can tell?
Well, I can tell anything. I mean, none of them guys are around now,
Because you lived right near, you lived right near, did you live right near all of them? Save and Lord lived up in
Oh,
West
yeah.
Brewster.
The first experience I had with Save and Lord, well, first of all, I'd lost my license for having beer in the car. And I just gotten my license back. It was just a summertime, and I had a TR3, Triumph TR3, the car that I bought from Neil Nevins. I had to put plywood floors in it. There was no floors in it. Anyhow, I picked up Gail, and I stopped and picked up some booze that I'd hidden in the woods.
Mhm.
And I was going to go meet Steve and all those guys.
Mhm.
So I'm going down the road, and I'm showing off, with Gail.
Mhm.
And come down around the corner, and here's a car in front of me, so I geared it down. And I looked over, and it was Save and Lord. And I was right up by his house on that twisty road up there. Needless to say, he pulled me over, and he screamed at me, "What the hell's the matter?" And Gail's hiding, she's got a cape. She's hiding the booze in this TR3, which wasn't easy. He's screaming at me,
you just got your license back. What the hell's the matter with you? I said, I was showing off. Or he let me go. He didn't give me a ticket. Praise the Lord.
And she still married you.
And she still married me. I know. She should have known better. She should have known better. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, I have one son married to a wonderful young lady, Melissa. Melissa texted the other day after we had our episode on the bridge. I'm ahead of myself here. We had an episode on the bridge with a broken down truck. Melissa said, you know, it's hard to keep up with these boys between my son and me. Gail's doing the guy. God bless Gail. God bless Gail. Yep. We've done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
We've done it is about an hour.
Yep. I mean, I think what we can do, if you'd be up for it, is we can end now, and then I'd love to reschedule you for a second.
I'd love to do that.
Okay.
This is fun.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's do
remembering
that.
stuff.
So we'll wrap up today, and we'll have another outing with you.